I discovered my entire home internet was dead at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, right in the middle of a critical video conference with clients in Japan who had stayed up until midnight their time just to meet with me. My name is Daniel Iverson, and I run a software consulting business from my home office in Clearwater, Florida, where reliable internet isn't just convenient, it's my entire livelihood. The screen froze mid-sentence, my carefully prepared presentation hanging in digital limbo, and then everything went black. I immediately grabbed my phone and checked the status. No connection whatsoever. My router showed no signal coming in through the fiber optic line. I rushed outside to check the junction box on the side of my house, and that's when I saw them. A massive construction crew tearing up the ground about 50 yards from my property line, right where the HOA had been planning some kind of drainage improvement project for the past 6 months. Heavy machinery groaned and beeped, workers shouted to each other over the noise, and I had a sinking feeling in my gut. Walking closer, I could see freshly exposed cables hanging from a torn-up section of earth. Some were thick black electrical lines, but there, severed cleanly in 2 places, was the distinctive yellow protective sheath of fiber optic cabling. My fiber optic cabling. The line that connected my house to the main trunk running along Sunset Boulevard, the line that I had paid $3,200 to have professionally installed 2 years ago because the HOA's approved internet provider couldn't deliver speeds above 25 megabits. Hey, I called out to the nearest worker, a young guy in an orange safety vest who was leaning against a backhoe. "That's my fiber line you just cut." He looked at me with the blank expression of someone who had no idea what I was talking about. "You'll have to talk to the foreman," he said, jerking his thumb toward a trailer set up at the edge of the construction site. I marched over to the trailer, my anger building with each step. The door was open, and inside I found a middle-aged man with a weathered face, studying blueprints spread across a folding table. "Are you the foreman?" I asked. "Mike Torres," he said without looking up. "What can I do for you?" "You can explain why your crew just cut my fiber optic internet line," I said, keeping my voice level despite wanting to shout. "I'm in the middle of running a business from my home, and now I have zero connectivity." That got his attention. He looked up, squinting at me. "We're working on the HOA drainage project. Everything we're doing is according to the plans they gave us." "Did those plans mention anything about a fiber optic line running through that area?" He shuffled through some papers, frowning. "There's utility markings here for power, gas, and water. Nothing about fiber optics." "That's because I had it installed privately," I said. "But that doesn't give you the right to just tear through it. You're supposed to call for a locate before you dig. That's basic construction protocol." Mike Torres had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Look, I'm just following the plans the HOA gave us. You need to take this up with them." "I will," I assured him. "But first, I need to know the name of your company and your contractor's license number. My internet line is business-critical infrastructure, and there are going to be consequences for this." He pulled a business card from his shirt pocket and handed it to me. "Torres Development and Construction, licensed in Florida since 1998. "I'm sorry about your internet," he said, "but we didn't know it was there. The HOA is responsible for providing accurate utility information." I took the card and pulled out my phone, snapping photos of the severed cable, the construction equipment, and the overall site. Then I started documenting everything with video, narrating what I was seeing for the record. Mike Torres watched me, but didn't try to smart man. By the time I got back to my house, I had already missed 2 follow-up calls from my Japanese clients. I sent them an apologetic email from my phone explaining the situation and promising to reschedule. Then I called my internet service provider, a small local company called Clearwater Fiber Solutions that specialized in high-speed residential connections. "Mr. Iverson," said the technician who answered, a guy named Robert who had done my original installation. "What's going on?" I explained the situation. He let out a low whistle. "That's going to be expensive to fix. We'll need to run a whole new line from the junction point to your house, and depending on how much they damaged, we might need to replace sections of the trunk line too. I can get someone out there tomorrow to assess the damage, but the actual repair could take a week, maybe 2. "A week?" My stomach dropped. "Robert, I run my entire business from home. I can't be offline for a week." I understand, but we're talking about splicing fiber optic cable here. It's delicate work, and that's assuming we can get access to the construction site to make the repairs. How much is this going to cost? For the assessment, nothing that's covered under your service agreement. For the actual repair, I'd estimate somewhere between $4,000 and $7,000, depending on the extent of the damage. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, send someone out tomorrow morning, and I need a detailed written report of everything, including the cause of the damage and the full cost breakdown. You got it. And Mr. Iverson, you should also document your business losses. If someone else caused this damage, you're going to want to recover those costs too. Smart advice. I spent the next hour calculating exactly what this outage was costing me. The lost contract with the Japanese clients was worth approximately $15. I had 3 other projects in progress that required daily communication and file transfers, representing another $28,000 in active revenue. Then there were the monthly retainer clients who paid me specifically for immediate availability and rapid turnaround times. Every hour I was offline was an hour I couldn't deliver the service they were paying for. By my conservative estimate, every hour of downtime was costing me roughly $400 in direct losses and opportunity costs, and that wasn't even counting the damage to my professional reputation. That evening, I drove over to the home of Patricia Morrison, the president of our HOA. Patricia was exactly what you'd picture when someone said HOA president, a 52-year-old woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive athleisure wear, and the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She lived in the largest house in our development, a sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion with a 3-car garage and a fountain in the front yard. I rang the doorbell and waited. Patricia answered after a moment, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. "Daniel," she said, "what brings you by?" "The construction crew working on the drainage project cut my fiber optic internet line this afternoon," I said. "I need to discuss how the HOA is going to handle this." Her expression shifted to something between sympathy and annoyance. "Oh, that's unfortunate. But you know, Daniel, we did send out notices about the construction project months ago. Homeowners were supposed to mark any private utilities." "I was never informed that I needed to mark anything," I said. "The notices I received just said there would be drainage work, nothing about utility marking or the potential for line damage." "Well, the contractor is responsible for calling in locates before they dig," Patricia said, her tone becoming defensive. "This isn't really an HOA issue. You should take it up with Torres Development." "Actually, Patricia, it is an HOA issue. The HOA hired Torres Development. The HOA is responsible for ensuring they follow proper procedures, and the HOA is responsible for any damages caused by contractors working on HOA projects." She crossed her arms. "I think you're overreacting, Daniel. It's just internet. Use your phone as a hotspot until it gets fixed." "It's not just internet," I said, feeling my anger rise again. "It's my business. I work from home doing software consulting, and I need high-speed, reliable connectivity. A phone hotspot isn't going to cut it for the kind of work I do. I've already lost 1 major contract because of this, and I'm going to lose more if this isn't fixed immediately." "That sounds like a personal problem," Patricia said. "The HOA's insurance doesn't cover individual business losses." "We'll see about that," I said. "I'm documenting everything, and I'll be filing a claim against both the HOA and Torres Development for the cost of repairs and my business losses. I suggest you contact your insurance company and let them know what happened." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening to sue the HOA, Daniel?" "I'm informing you of the situation and the consequences," I said. "What happens next depends on how you handle this." She stepped back and started to close the door. "I'll bring this up at the next board meeting. That's the best I can do." "When's the next board meeting?" 2 weeks from Thursday." 2 weeks, I stared at her. "Patricia, I need this resolved now, not in 2 weeks." "The board meets on a regular schedule," she said primly. "I can't just call an emergency meeting for every little issue that comes up. You'll have to be patient." She closed the door in my face before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to my insurance agent, to see if my business insurance covered this kind of interruption. Then to a lawyer I knew from my college days who had gone into civil litigation. His name was Marcus Reynolds. and we had stayed in touch over the years despite living in different cities. He practiced in Tampa, just a 30-minute drive from Clearwater. When I explained the situation, he listened carefully and then asked a series of pointed questions. "So let me make sure I understand," Marcus said. "A construction company hired by your HOA cut your privately installed fiber optic line. You've documented the damage and the business losses, and the HOA president basically told you to pound sand?" "That's accurate," I said. "And you have a service contract with the fiber company that specifies the cost and timeline for repairs?" "I will tomorrow, after they do the assessment." "Good. Here's what you need to do, Daniel. Document everything. Every single cost, every lost contract, every hour of downtime. Keep a detailed log. Get written estimates from the fiber company. Then send a formal demand letter to both the HOA and Torres Development, outlining the damages and giving them 30 days to make you whole." 30 days? "Marcus, I need this fixed now." "I know, but legally you have to give them a reasonable opportunity to address the issue before you escalate. 30 days is standard. However, you can and should push the fiber company to expedite the repairs and bill the responsible parties for any rush charges. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it gets for everyone. What if they refuse to pay? Then you file suit in civil court. Based on what you're telling me, you'd have a strong case. Contractor negligence, HOA liability for their hired contractor's actions, quantifiable business damages. You might even get the HOA's insurance company to settle quickly, just to avoid litigation costs." "How much are we talking about in potential damages?" "Well, there's the direct cost of repairs, which you said could be up to $7,000. Then there's your business losses. If you're offline for 2 weeks and you're losing $400 an hour, that's what? Roughly 134 hours at $400 per hour. That's over $53. Zero right there. Add in consequential damages, loss of business reputation, maybe some punitive damages if you can show gross negligence or willful misconduct. You could be looking at a 6-figure claim." The number made my head spin. I don't want to gouge anyone, Marcus. I just want to be made whole. And that's exactly what the law provides for. But here's the thing, if the HOA is being difficult now, they're probably going to be difficult throughout this process. You need to be prepared for a fight. "I'm prepared," I said. The next morning, Robert from Clearwater Fiber Solutions arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with a colleague, a woman named Jennifer, who specialized in fiber optic repair assessment. They spent 90 minutes examining the damage, taking measurements, and conferring in low voices while making notes on tablets. When they finally came to my door, Robert's expression was grim. "It's worse than I thought," he said. "They didn't just cut your drop line, they damaged the main trunk line that serves 3 other customers in this area. We're going to have to replace about 300 feet of trunk line and run a completely new drop to your house." "How much?" Jennifer consulted her tablet. "For the trunk line repair, we're looking at $12,400. For your new drop line, another $3,800. Total of $16. $200 for materials and labor." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "And the timeline. We can get the parts ordered today, but delivery will take 5 to 7 business days. Then we need to coordinate with the construction crew to ensure we have access to the damaged area. Then the actual installation, which will take 2 days for the trunk line and 1 day for your drop. Realistically, you're looking at 2.5 to 3 weeks before you're back online." 3 weeks, I repeated numbly. "That's going to cost me my business." "I'm sorry, Mr. Iverson," Robert said. "We'll do everything we can to expedite this. And I've prepared a detailed damage report that clearly states the cause was construction activity, not any fault in our installation or your equipment. You can use this for your insurance claim or legal action." He handed me a thick folder with photos, diagrams, and cost breakdowns. It was thorough and professionally done. "Thank you," I said. "Can you do me another favor? Can you provide an estimate for what it would cost to do an emergency rush repair? Like, if money was no object and you brought in extra crews and paid for expedited shipping." Robert and Jennifer exchanged glances. "We could potentially get it done in 5 to 7 days if we really pushed," Robert said. "But the expedite fees would add another $8, zero zone to the total. We'd be talking about $24,200 all in, and that would be a guaranteed timeline. As guaranteed as anything can be in this business. Weather permitting, assuming we can get site access, yes. Put that in writing too, I said. Include both the standard timeline and cost versus the expedited timeline and cost. While they worked on that, I called Marcus Reynolds again. The damage is worse than we thought, I told him. $16,000 for standard repairs, $24,000 for expedited. 3 weeks for standard, 1 week for expedited. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That changes the calculation. If you go with expedited repairs, you're only offline for 1 week instead of 3, which reduces your business losses but increases the direct repair costs. You need to figure out which option minimizes your total damages. I did the math in my head. 3 weeks at $400 per hour, 24 hours a day, no. That wasn't right. I wasn't losing money while I slept. More like 10 billable hours per day. 3 weeks was 15 business days. So 150 hours at $400 per hour. That was $60,000 in losses plus $16,200 in repairs for a total of $76,200. Versus 1 week of expedited repairs, which would be 5 business days or 50 hours, so $20,000 in losses plus $24,200 in repairs for a total of $44,200. The expedited option saves me about $32,000 in total damages, I said. Then that's what you should do, Marcus said, and you bill the responsible parties for all of it. I'll draft the demand letter today. Who should it go to? Patricia Morrison as HOA president, and Mike Torres at Torres Development and Construction. Got it. I'll have it ready for your review by this afternoon. I authorized Clearwater Fiber Solutions to proceed with the expedited repair schedule and paid them a 50% deposit on my credit card, wincing as I confirmed the $1,200 charge. But it was the right move strategically. The faster this got fixed, the less my total damages would be. Then I settled in for what was going to be a very difficult week. I set up my phone as a mobile hotspot and discovered that the connection was just barely functional enough for email and light web browsing, but completely inadequate for video calls or large file transfers. I spent the morning calling all my active clients and explaining the situation. Most were understanding, but 2 were not. The Japanese clients, still upset about the aborted meeting, informed me they were moving forward with another consulting firm. There went $15,000. Another client, a startup in Austin that needed daily code reviews, said they couldn't wait 3 weeks for me to get back online and suspended the contract. Another $8,500 gone. By noon, I had quantified $23,500 in immediate losses, with more potentially coming if the situation dragged on. I documented everything in a detailed spreadsheet: client names, contract values, dates of communication, and the specific business lost. At 2 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia Morrison standing there with another woman I recognized as Linda Chen, the HOA's vice president. Both of them looked serious. "Daniel," Patricia said, her voice stiff, "we need to talk about your behavior yesterday." "My behavior?" I said, genuinely confused. "You came to my home and threatened legal action," Patricia said. "That's completely inappropriate. If you have an issue with the HOA, you need to go through proper channels." "I informed you of a serious problem caused by an HOA contractor," I said, "and you told me I'd have to wait 2 weeks for a board meeting. That's not acceptable when we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in damages." Linda Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Iverson, the HOA operates under specific bylaws and procedures. We can't just decisions on the fly because one homeowner has a problem." "This isn't just a problem," I said, struggling to keep my temper. "This is significant property damage and business interruption caused by negligence, and it needs to be addressed immediately." "We've spoken to Torres Development," Patricia said. "They've explained that they followed all proper procedures and weren't informed about any private fiber optic lines in the construction area. They're required to call for utility locates before they dig," I said. "That's Florida law." "Did they do that?" Patricia and Linda exchanged glances. "They said they did," Patricia said, but she sounded less certain now. "Can they prove it? Because I'm going to request documentation of their locate request from the Utility Notification Center. If they didn't actually call it in, that's a violation of Florida Statute 556, and they're automatically liable for any damages." "You seem to have done your research," Linda said, her tone frosty. "I've spent the morning on the phone with lawyers and insurance companies," I said. "Yes, I've done my research. And here's what I know. The HOA is jointly liable for any damages caused by contractors hired for HOA projects. Your insurance company is going to have to pay for this one way or another. The only question is whether we can handle this amicably or whether it has to go through litigation. Patricia drew herself up. The HOA is not going to be bullied into paying for your business losses, Daniel. That's simply not our responsibility. Then we'll let the courts decide, I said. Fine, Patricia said. You do what you have to do. But I'm warning you, if you sue the HOA, we will fight this every step of the way. We have excellent legal counsel, and we're not going to just roll over because you're having internet problems. It's not internet problems, I said, my voice rising. It's my entire livelihood. I've already lost over $23,000 in contracts because of this, and it's only been one day. By the time this is fixed, I could be out $50,000 or $60,000, plus the repair costs. All because your contractor didn't follow basic safety protocols. That's your choice to work from home, Patricia said. The HOA can't be held responsible for every homeowner's personal business arrangements. Watch me prove otherwise, I said, and closed the door. Through the window, I watched them walk back to Patricia's Mercedes, their heads together in intense conversation. I felt a grim satisfaction. They were starting to realize this wasn't going to go away quietly. That afternoon, Marcus emailed me the draft demand letter. It was beautifully written, laying out the facts in clear, unemotional language. The nature of the damage, the cause, the applicable laws and regulations, the documented costs, and the demand for full compensation within 30 days. He had addressed it to both Patricia Morrison as HOA president and Mike Torres personally. One thing, Marcus said when I called him after reviewing it, you should also send a copy to the HOA's property management company and their insurance carrier. Get everyone involved in the loop immediately. The more people who know about this, the harder it is for the HOA to just ignore it. How do I find out who their insurance carrier is? Check your HOA documents. It should be listed there. If not, you can ask Patricia directly, or I can send a formal request for that information as part of the demand letter process. I dug out my HOA documents and found the information. The association was insured by a company called Homestead Mutual Insurance, with a policy number and contact information. I added them to the distribution list for the demand letter. The letter went out the next day via certified mail, return receipt requested. Within 48 hours, I started getting phone calls. First was Mike Torres. Mr. Iverson, he said, his voice tight. I just received a legal demand for over $44,000. This is completely unreasonable. It's completely documented, I said. Every dollar is accounted for. Direct repair costs plus business losses caused by your company's negligence. My company did not act negligently, Torres said. We followed standard procedures. Did you call for a utility locate before you started digging? There was a pause. We relied on the utility information provided by the HOA. That's not what I asked. Did you personally call Sunshine State One Call and request a full utility locate for the construction area? Another pause. The HOA told us they had already handled that. So that's a no, I said. Florida law requires contractors to independently verify utility locations before excavation. You can't just rely on what the property owner tells you. That's basic due diligence, and you failed to do it. I want to settle this reasonably, Torres said. I'm willing to pay for the direct repair costs, but I'm not paying for your business losses. That's excessive. My business losses are a direct and foreseeable result of your negligence, I said. Any reasonable person would understand that cutting someone's internet line is going to cause financial harm if they work from home. This isn't excessive, it's actual damages. Then we'll let the insurance companies figure it out, Torres said, and hung up. Next was a claims adjuster from Homestead Mutual named Gary Peterson. He was more professional but equally skeptical. Mr. Iverson, I've reviewed your demand letter and the supporting documentation, Gary said. I have some questions about the business loss calculations. You're claiming $400 per hour in losses. Can you substantiate that? I walked him through my client contracts, my hourly rates, the specific opportunities I had lost, and the ongoing impact of being offline. I had it all documented in excruciating detail. I see, Gary said, and you're claiming these losses will continue until the repairs are complete. That's correct. I'm currently working from a mobile hotspot that's inadequate for my business needs. I can do email and basic web browsing, but I can't do video conferences, I can't transfer large files, and I can't access the cloud-based development environments I use for coding. So yes, I'm effectively offline for business purposes. Have you considered renting office space or using a co-working facility temporarily? I have. Actually, I said. The nearest co-working space with adequate internet is in Tampa, which is a 30-minute drive each way. The daily rate is $85, plus gas and time. Over the course of the repair period, that would add another $700 to $800 in costs, which I would also bill to the responsible parties, Gary sighed. Mr. Iverson, I'm going to be honest with you. These business loss claims are difficult. They're always disputed, and they rarely pay out at the full claimed amount. I'd like to propose a settlement. We pay for the full cost of repairs, including the expedite fees, and we pay you a lump sum of $10.00 for business interruption. That's $34,200 total, and you agree to release the HOA and Torres development from any further liability. That's not even close to my actual damages, I said. I've already lost $23,500 in confirmed contract cancellations, with more likely coming. Plus the repair costs, you're asking me to eat at least $13,000 in losses. You might recover that amount if this goes to trial, Gary said, but it'll take months or years, and there are no guarantees. A trial is expensive and time-consuming for everyone involved. My offer gives you certainty and gets you paid quickly. I'll think about it, I said, which was polite code for absolutely not. You have my number, Gary said. The offer stands for 7 days. After that, I'll have to reevaluate based on how the situation develops. After I hung up, I called Marcus and relayed the conversation. He laughed. $10,000 for business interruption? That's insulting. They're lowballing you to see if you'll bite. Don't take it. I wasn't planning to, I said, but it's frustrating. I have all this documentation. Everything is clearly proven, and they're still trying to minimize their exposure. That's how insurance companies work, Marcus said. They're in the business of collecting premiums and denying claims. But here's the thing. They know you have a strong case, or they wouldn't be offering anything at all. The fact that they came to the table this quickly tells me they're worried. So what do? You wait. Let the repairs proceed. Keep documenting everything, and in the meantime, I'm going to file a formal complaint with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation against Torres Development for failing to call in a locate before excavation. If they did violate the statute, that creates an automatic presumption of liability that will strengthen our position significantly. How long does that take? The complaint process. Usually 4 to 6 weeks for an initial investigation, but the existence of the complaint is useful immediately. It puts Torres Development on notice that this is serious, and it creates an official record of the violation. Do it, I said. While all this was happening, my life had become a daily exercise in frustration. Simple tasks that I used to take for granted, downloading software updates, backing up files to the cloud, joining video meetings, were now either impossible or painfully slow. I watched my professional reputation take hit after hit as I missed deadlines, rescheduled meetings, and explained over and over why I couldn't deliver services I had promised. One client, a financial services firm in Chicago, was particularly unhappy. Their chief technology officer, a woman named Rebecca, who I had worked with for 3 years, called me on day 4 of the outage. "Daniel, I need to be direct with you," she said. "We have a major audit coming up, and we need that security review completed by Friday. You committed to having it done, and now you're telling me you can't deliver because of an internet problem?" "It's not just an internet problem, Rebecca," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. My fiber optic line was physically severed by a construction crew. I'm working on getting it repaired, but in the meantime, I literally cannot access the tools and systems I need to complete your security review. "Then you should have contingency plans," she said. "This is a critical deliverable for us, Daniel. If you can't do it, we need to find someone who can." "I understand," I said, "and I'm deeply sorry for the situation. This was completely beyond my control." "That doesn't change the fact that we're left without the review we need," Rebecca said. "I'm going to have to suspend our contract pending resolution of this issue. And frankly, I'm not sure we'll be renewing when it comes up next quarter. Reliability is essential in this business. The contract was worth $18,000 annually, paid in quarterly installments of $4,500. I had just received the last payment 2 weeks ago, so I wasn't losing immediate money, but the loss of future business was real and quantifiable. I added it to my damages spreadsheet, $18,000 in lost future revenue. My total documented losses were now over $41,000 and climbing. On day 5, Clearwater Fiber Solutions called with good news. The replacement parts had arrived ahead of schedule, and they were ready to begin work the next morning. Robert explained that they had coordinated with Mike Torres to ensure access to the construction site, and that Torres Development had actually agreed to provide some equipment assistance to expedite the repair. Did Torres say why they're suddenly being helpful? I asked. Not directly, Robert said, but reading between the lines, I think their insurance company told them to cooperate fully. Probably trying to minimize the damages at this point. The repair work began early Saturday morning. I stood outside watching as a crew of 4 technicians from Clearwater Fiber Solutions worked in careful coordination, splicing fiber optic cables with precision equipment, while Torres Development's backhoe dug new trenches under Robert's direction. It was fascinating to watch the technical expertise on display, each person knowing exactly what they needed to do. By Sunday afternoon, the trunk line was repaired and tested, my new drop line was installed on Monday, and by 4 p.m. Robert was at my door with a big smile. You're back online, Mr. Iverson. Full gigabit speeds, clean signal, everything looks perfect. I rushed to my office and checked. My computer connected instantly, the download speeds were exactly what they should be, and everything was functioning normally. I could have cried with relief. Thank you, I told Robert. You guys did an incredible job getting this done so fast. Just doing our work, he said. And here's your final invoice. The total was $24,180, just slightly under the estimate due to some efficiency savings in the labor. I paid it immediately with a check, knowing I'd be recovering this money soon enough. Now came the hard part, collecting from the responsible parties. I updated my damages spreadsheet with the final numbers. Direct repair costs, $24,180. Documented business losses, $41. $500 in canceled contracts plus $15,000 in lost billable hours during the 7-day outage for a total of $56,500. Grand total, $80,680. Marcus drafted a revised demand letter with the final figures and sent it to all parties via certified mail. This time, the response was swift. Gary Peterson from Homes Mutual called the next day. Mr. Iverson, I've reviewed your updated claim. I'm authorized to offer you a settlement of $45,000, all in, full release of liability. That's still $35,000 short of my documented damages, I said. It's a fair offer, Gary insisted. Business loss claims are inherently speculative. You're asking us to believe that you would have earned that money if not for the outage, but there's no guarantee of that. Contracts fall through for all kinds of reasons. I have emails and phone logs documenting exactly why each contract was canceled or suspended, I said. There's nothing speculative about it. These clients told me explicitly that they were ending the relationship because of the service interruption. I understand, but our position is that some of that risk is inherent in your business model. Working from home, relying on a single internet connection, those are choices you made that created vulnerability. I felt my anger rising. So you're saying it's my fault that your insured's contractor cut my internet line? I'm saying that the damages aren't as clear-cut as you're presenting them, Gary said, but I've been authorized to go higher. My final offer is $55,000. That's as far as I can go without executive approval, and I don't think they'll approve more than that. Then get executive approval, I said, because I'm not settling for less than my full documented damages. Mr. Iverson, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I interrupted. I'm asking to be compensated for the actual, documented harm caused by your insured's negligence. That's the most reasonable thing in the world. If you won't pay it voluntarily, I'll get a court to order it. That could take years, Gary warned. I'm aware, I said, but I'm prepared to see this through. I hung up and immediately called Marcus. They're up to $55,000, I told him. Still not enough. Then we file suit, Marcus said. I've already started drafting the complaint. We'll file in Pinellas County Circuit Court, naming both the HOA and Torres Development as defendants. We're asking for full compensatory damages plus attorney's fees and costs. How much are attorney's fees going to run? For a case like this, probably $20,000 to $30,000 if it goes all the way to trial, but there's a good chance it won't get that far. Once we file, the defendants are going to have to hire their own lawyers, and those lawyers are going to advise them that fighting this is more expensive than settling. I'd guess we'll have a serious settlement offer within 60 days of filing. Do it, I said. The lawsuit was filed on October 15th. The complaint was a masterpiece of legal writing, laying out in meticulous detail the sequence of events, the applicable laws, the evidence of negligence, and the damages suffered. Marcus filed it electronically and had physical copies served on both Patricia Morrison and Mike Torres. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Patricia called me at 8 a.m. the next morning, her voice shaking with rage. "How dare you sue the HOA? This is a betrayal of the entire community. This is a legitimate legal claim for damages caused by the HOA's contractor," I said calmly. "I gave you multiple opportunities to resolve this amicably, and you refused." "The HOA board is going to fight this with everything we have," Patricia said, "and when we win, we're going to sue you for our legal fees. You've made a huge mistake, Daniel." "I don't think I have," I said, "but I guess we'll find out." She hung up on me. An hour later, I got an email from the entire HOA board, Patricia Morrison, Linda Chen, and 3 other members I barely knew informing me that I was being fined $500 for frivolous legal action against the association, and that my HOA voting privileges were being suspended pending resolution of the lawsuit. I forwarded the email to Marcus, who laughed out loud when he read it. "They can't do that," he said. "You can't fine someone for exercising their legal rights. That's retaliatory and probably violates Florida's HOA statutes. We'll add that to the complaint as an amended claim." "This is getting ugly," I said. "It always does," Marcus said. "But we're on solid ground. Just keep documenting everything they do. Every retaliatory action they take just strengthens our case." 2 weeks after we filed the lawsuit, Torres Development filed their answer to the complaint. As expected, they denied everything. Denied negligence, denied causation, denied the extent of damages. Their lawyer, a guy named Peter Hardwick from a big firm in Tampa, also filed a cross-claim against the HOA, arguing that if Torres Development was liable, it was only because the HOA had failed to provide accurate utility information. The HOA, represented by a lawyer named Susan Keller, filed their own answer denying liability and arguing that I had assumed the risk of damage to my privately installed utilities by choosing to work from home. They also filed a counterclaim seeking to recover their legal fees from me on the grounds that my lawsuit was frivolous and harassing. This is pretty standard stuff. Marcus assured me when I expressed concern about the counterclaim. "They're just trying to intimidate you. No judge is going to award them fees for defending against a legitimate damage claim." The next phase was discovery, where both sides exchanged documents and took depositions. I had to provide 3 years of tax returns, all my business records, client contracts, and correspondence documenting the losses I had claimed. It was invasive and time-consuming, but Marcus said it was necessary to prove my damages. In return, we got to request documents from the defendants. Marcus asked Torres Development for proof that they had called in a utility locate before, excavating their safety protocols and training records, and all communications with the HOA about the construction project. From the HOA, we requested all documents related to the drainage project, including the contract with Torres Development, any insurance policies, and all communications about my damage claim. The results were illuminating. Torres Development produced a call log showing that they had, in fact, called Sunshine State 1 call to request a utility locate on the day before they started excavation. However, the locate was only for public utilities, gas, electric, water, and sewer. They had not requested a private utility locate, which would have identified my fiber optic line. "This is perfect," Marcus said when we reviewed the documents. "They're admitting they knew about the locate requirement, but they only did a partial locate. That's exactly the kind of negligence we need to prove liability." The HOA's documents were even better. Their contract with Torres Development explicitly stated that Torres Development was responsible for identifying and protecting all utilities, public and private, within the construction area. And there were emails between Patricia Morrison and Mike Torres where Patricia had specifically asked whether Torres Development had checked for private utilities, and Mike had responded, "We'll handle all utility coordination per our standard procedures." They knew private utilities might be an issue, Marcus said, grinning, and they did nothing to specifically address it. That's negligence on both parties. We've got them. The depositions were scheduled for late November. I was deposed first in Marcus's office in Tampa. Peter Hardwick, the lawyer for Torres Development, spent 4 hours asking me detailed questions about my business, my income, my client relationships, and the specific damages I had claimed. He was looking for any inconsistency or exaggeration he could exploit. I answered every question truthfully and calmly, sticking to the facts. When he challenged my business loss calculations, I walked him through the spreadsheet line by line. When he suggested I could have mitigated my damages by renting office space, I explained why that wasn't a practical solution for my specific work requirements. When he implied that my clients might have canceled for reasons unrelated to the internet outage, I produced emails and call logs showing that they had explicitly cited the service interruption as the reason. By the end of the deposition, Hardwick looked frustrated. He hadn't gotten the admissions he wanted. A week later, it was Mike Torres's turn to be deposed. Marcus conducted the deposition in Hardwick's office, and I attended as a party to the lawsuit. Watching Marcus work was educational. He walked Mike Torres through the entire sequence of events, establishing that Torres Development was an experienced contractor, that they were familiar with Florida's excavation safety laws, and that they knew private utilities could be present in residential areas. Then Marcus asked the critical question. "Mr. Torres, when you called Sunshine State One Call to request a utility locate, did you specifically ask them to mark private utilities?" "No," Mike admitted. "We asked for the standard locate, which covers public utilities." "Were you aware that private utilities, such as privately installed fiber optic lines, would not be included in a standard locate?" Yes, I suppose so." "So you knew there was a possibility of private utilities in the construction area, and you chose not to request a comprehensive locate that would identify them." "We relied on the HOA to inform us of any private utilities," Mike said. "But the contract between Torres Development and the HOA states that you were responsible for identifying and protecting all utilities, does it not?" Mike glanced at his lawyer, who nodded slightly. "Yes, it does. And yet you did not take steps to identify private utilities before you began excavation." "We did what we always do," Mike said, sounding defensive now. "This has never been a problem before." "Until it was," Marcus said softly. "No further questions." When it was the HOA's turn, Marcus deposed Patricia Morrison. She was hostile from the start, glaring at me from across the conference table like I had personally betrayed her. Susan Keller, the HOA's lawyer, sat beside her, occasionally whispering instructions. Marcus took Patricia through the HOA's decision to hire Torres Development, the scope of the drainage project, and what steps the HOA had taken to protect homeowners from potential damage. "Mrs. Morrison, did the HOA notify homeowners that they should mark any private utilities before the construction began?" "We sent out notice of the construction project," Patricia said. "Did that notice specifically instruct homeowners to mark private utilities?" Patricia hesitated. "I don't recall the exact wording." Marcus produced a copy of the notice that had been sent to residents. It was a single page describing the drainage project and the expected timeline. Nowhere did it mention utilities or the need for homeowners to mark anything. "Does this refresh your recollection?" Marcus asked. "That's the notice we sent," Patricia admitted. "And there's no mention of private utilities, is there?" "No, but homeowners are responsible for their own property." "Are they responsible for protecting their property from damage caused by HOA contractors?" "Homeowners should be aware of construction risks," Patricia said. Marcus smiled. "Let me ask you this, Mrs. Morrison. If an HOA contractor accidentally drove a bulldozer through someone's fence, would that homeowner be responsible for the damage because they should have been aware of construction risks?" "That's different," Patricia said. "How is it different?" "It just is." Susan Keller intervened. "I think we've covered this line of questioning adequately, counsel." Marcus let it go, but the point was made. The HOA's position that homeowners bore the risk of damage from HOA construction projects was legally absurd. As winter arrived and the case moved through the court system, something interesting happened. The community started to turn against the HOA board. It started with a homeowner named Steve Wilson, who lived 2 streets over from me. He had heard about my lawsuit and reached out to ask what happened. When I explained the situation, he was outraged. "That's ridiculous," he said. "The HOA should have covered your damages immediately. That's what our dues are supposed to pay for insurance against this kind of thing." "Apparently the board doesn't see it that way," I said. "They're wasting our money fighting a lawsuit they're going to lose," Steve said. "I'm going to bring this up at the next HOA meeting." He did exactly that. The next HOA meeting, held in mid-December, turned into a referendum on the board's handling of my case. Steve stood up during the open comment period and gave a passionate speech about how the board was being penny-wise and pound-foolish, spending more on legal fees than it would cost to just pay my claim. Other homeowners joined in. A woman named Carol Martinez pointed out that if the HOA lost the lawsuit, the assessment would fall on all the homeowners to cover the judgment and legal fees. "We're all going to end up paying for Patricia's stubbornness," she said. Patricia tried to defend the board's position, arguing that giving in to my unreasonable demands would set a bad precedent and encourage other homeowners to make frivolous claims. But it was clear the room wasn't with her. By January, there was a petition circulating to recall the entire HOA board and elect new members who would settle the lawsuit. I didn't participate in the petition drive. Marcus advised me to stay out of HOA politics while the litigation was pending, but I watched with interest as it gained momentum. Meanwhile, the lawsuit was approaching a critical juncture. The court had scheduled a mediation for February 14th, Valentine's Day, with a retired judge serving as mediator. All parties were required to attend and negotiate in good faith. The mediation took place in a conference room at the mediator's office in downtown Tampa. On one side of the table sat me and Marcus. On the other side were Mike Torres and Peter Hardwick, Patricia Morrison and Susan Keller, and Gary Peterson from Homestead Mutual. The mediator, a distinguished-looking man named Judge Raymond Pierce, explained the process. He would hear opening statements from each side, then conduct separate caucus sessions with each party to explore settlement options. His goal was to help us find common ground and avoid the cost and uncertainty of trial. Marcus gave our opening statement, calmly and clearly presenting our case. Torres Development had failed to properly identify utilities before excavation, resulting in damage to my fiber optic line. The damage had caused significant business losses, all of which were documented. The total damages were $80,680, and we were seeking full compensation plus attorney's fees and costs. Peter Hardwick responded on behalf of Torres Development, arguing that they had followed industry standards and relied on information provided by the HOA. He claimed my business loss calculations were inflated and speculative. Susan Keller for the HOA argued that the association bore no responsibility for the actions of an independent contractor and that my decision to work from home created the vulnerability that led to my losses. Judge Pierce listened to all 3 presentations without comment, then called for a break. He met with our side first. "You have a strong case," he told us bluntly. "The defendant contractor clearly failed to do an adequate locate, and the HOA's position on liability is weak. If this goes to trial, I think you'll win. The question is how much you'll recover." "Our damages are all documented," Marcus said. "I know," Judge Pierce said, "but juries are unpredictable, especially when it comes to business loss claims. They might give you everything you're asking for, or they might decide that someone who works from home should have a backup plan and reduce your damages accordingly. There's also the time factor. If you go to trial, you're looking at another 6 to 9 months before you see any money, and there's always the possibility of an appeal after that." "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting you consider what you'd accept to settle this today," Judge Pierce said. "Give me a number, and I'll see if I can get the defendants to meet it." Marcus and I conferred briefly. "We'd take $75,000, Marcus said. "Full damages minus a small discount to account for the certainty of settlement versus the risk of trial." Judge Pierce nodded and went to caucus with the other side. An hour passed, then another. Finally, he came back. They're at 60,000, he said. Torres Development's insurance is covering 45, and Homestead Mutual is covering 15 on behalf of the HOA. That's their final offer. Still 20,000 short, I said. I know, Judge Pierce said, but let me tell you what else they're offering. They'll pay your attorney's fees and costs to date, which I understand are running around 18,000. So you're actually looking at 78,000 total, which is within 3,000 of your total claim. I looked at Marcus. He shrugged. It's your call, Daniel. I think we could get more at trial, but there's risk involved. This offer gives you almost everything you asked for, and you get paid within 30 days instead of waiting another year. I thought about it. The past 4 months had been exhausting. The stress of the litigation, the damage to my business relationships, the constant back and forth with lawyers and insurance companies. I was ready for it to be over. And $78,000 was close enough to my $80,680 claim that I could live with it. I'll take it, I said, but I want one more thing. A written apology from the HOA acknowledging that I was right, and they mishandled this from the beginning. Judge Pierce raised his eyebrows. That might be a tough sell. It's important to me, I said. I don't want them to just write a check and pretend they didn't do anything wrong. I want them on record admitting they screwed up. The judge went back to the other side. This time he was gone for almost 2 hours. When he returned, he had a handwritten note. They'll do it, he said, but it has to be private just to you, not a public statement, and the wording will be carefully negotiated. I can live with that, I said. The final settlement agreement took another week to draft and finalize. Torres Development's insurance company would pay $45,000. Homestead Mutual would pay $15,000 on behalf of the HOA. Both payments would be made directly to me. Torres Development and Homestead Mutual would also jointly pay Marcus's fees and costs totaling $18,200. And buried in the settlement documents was a letter signed by Patricia Morrison on behalf of the HOA board. It read, "The Board of Directors of Sunset Palms Homeowners Association acknowledges that the damage to Daniel Iverson's fiber optic line was caused by construction activities related to an HOA-approved project, and that the association could have handled Mr. Iverson's claim more promptly and professionally. The board regrets any inconvenience or financial harm caused to Mr. Iverson and commits to implementing improved procedures for coordinating utility protection in future construction projects." It wasn't a groveling apology, but it was an acknowledgement. That was enough for me. The settlement checks arrived in mid-March. I deposited them and immediately paid off the credit card I had used to cover the repair costs. Then I paid Marcus his fees. What was left over, about $38,000, went into my business savings account as a buffer against future emergencies. But the story didn't end there. In April, the petition to recall the HOA board succeeded. A special election was held, and all 5 board members were voted out and replaced with new people, including Steve Wilson as the new president. One of Steve's first acts was to commission an audit of the HOA's finances and management practices over the past 3 years. The audit revealed that the HOA had spent $47,000 in legal fees defending against my lawsuit, nearly as much as the settlement itself. It also revealed several other questionable expenditures, including $12,000 paid to a landscaping company owned by Patricia Morrison's brother-in-law and $8,000 for a consulting fee to a company that had no clear deliverables. Steve called me in May and asked if I would serve on a committee to draft new HOA bylaws with better financial controls and homeowner protections. I agreed and spent the next several months working with a group of engaged homeowners to create a governing structure that was more transparent and accountable. We implemented requirements for competitive bidding on all contracts over $5,000. We created a reserve fund for emergency repairs and liability claims. We established clear procedures for responding to homeowner complaints and damage claims, and we adopted rules requiring contractor verification of utilities before any excavation work. By the time we were done, the Sunset Palms HOA had been transformed from Patricia Morrison's personal fiefdom into a genuinely democratic organization that served the interests of all homeowners. As for me, my business recovered fully. The clients I had lost during the internet outage were replaced by new ones. My reputation for thoroughness and attention to detail, demonstrated by how meticulously I had documented my damages in the lawsuit, actually helped me win new contracts with clients who valued that kind of precision. I also made some changes to my business continuity planning. I installed a secondary internet connection through a different provider and a different physical route, so I would never again be completely offline due to a single point of failure. I set up relationships with 2 co-working spaces in Tampa that I could use on short notice, and I started keeping a detailed log of all my business activities, just in case I ever needed to prove damages again. The construction project that had caused all this trouble was eventually completed in July, almost 9 months after it had started. The new drainage system worked well, preventing the flooding that had plagued our neighborhood during heavy rains. Mike Torres and his crew finished the work professionally and without further incident. I ran into Mike one afternoon while he was doing the final site cleanup. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, then he extended his hand. "No hard feelings," he said. I shook his hand. "No hard feelings, you were just doing your job. I was protecting my business." Sometimes those things collide. "I learned something from this," Mike said. "I've changed our procedures. We now do comprehensive private utility locates on every job, even if the property owner doesn't specifically request it. It costs a little more up front, but it's a lot cheaper than dealing with lawsuits." "Glad something good came out of it," I said. As I walked back to my house that evening, I thought about everything that had happened. A simple construction accident had escalated into a months-long legal battle, cost multiple parties tens of thousands of dollars, and led to the complete restructuring of our HOA. It had been stressful and exhausting, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even when it's difficult. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when powerful people tell you to back down. And sometimes a seemingly small incident, a severed fiber optic cable, can catalyze changes that benefit an entire community. I thought about the penalty Mike Torres and his insurance company had paid, effectively $1, $200 per hour for the 7 days my internet was down, calculated as part of the total settlement. It seemed like a lot of money for a simple mistake, but it reflected the real cost of that mistake to my business and my livelihood. And it sent a clear message to every contractor in the area: take utility protection seriously or pay the price. The sun was setting over Clearwater, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. My home office window glowed with the light of computer monitors, all connected and functioning perfectly. My business was thriving, my community was stronger, and I had learned lessons about resilience, documentation, and the importance of standing up for yourself that would serve me for the rest of my life. It had been a long journey from that afternoon in October when my internet went dead in the middle of a video conference. But I had come through it stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever challenges might come next. And if there was one thing I knew for certain, it was this: I would never again take a functioning internet connection for granted. The fiber optic line that now ran from the street to my house was more than just a cable carrying data. It was a symbol of what I had fought for and won. It was a reminder that businesses built from home offices are real businesses, with real value and real rights. And it was a testament to the principle that when someone damages your property or interferes with your livelihood, you have every right to demand full compensation and to fight for it if necessary. As I sat down at my desk to review emails from my clients, I smiled. The internet was working perfectly, my business was back on track, and somewhere in the HOA office, Steve Wilson was probably working late to make sure our community continued to improve and thrive. It had been worth every hour of stress, every dollar of legal fees, and every moment of uncertainty. Because in the end, justice had been served, damages had been paid, and the system had worked the way it was supposed to. Not quickly, not easily, but ultimately fairly, and that, I realized, was the best outcome I could have hoped for. The developer who cut my fiber optic line had learned his lesson. The HOA that tried to avoid responsibility had been held accountable. And I had proven that even an individual homeowner, armed with documentation and determination, could stand up to larger organizations and prevail. The penalty had been $2,200 per hour, calculated across 168 hours of total downtime when you factored in the settlement numbers. It was steep, but it was just, and it would make everyone think twice before they failed to properly locate utilities before excavation. As I closed my laptop for the evening and looked out at my quiet suburban street, I felt a sense of peace. The battle was over, the war had been won, and life in Sunset Palms was better for everyone, because one homeowner had refused to accept being told that his devastating business losses were just an unfortunate incident that wasn't anyone's responsibility. Sometimes the hardest fights are the ones worth fighting, and sometimes a severed cable leads to changes that strengthen an entire community. That was the real story of what happened when a developer cut my fiber optic line during HOA construction. Not just about money or damages or legal victories, but about standing up for what was right and making sure that those who caused harm took responsibility for it. And in the end, that made all the difference.